Welcome to the podcast of Data and Analytics in Business. We'll learn from the leading industry experts using data and analytics to solve the problems and create values in practice. We'll also learn where the industry is heading to and how data and analytics will shape the industry in the future. Most importantly, how they are preparing their business for digital transformation and disruption in the future. I'm your host, Jason Tan, and thank you for listening. In this episode, we have got Sue-Ann Lim. Sue-Ann is the Chief Executive Officer of Trapper, a leading marketing and media agency in Malaysia. Sue-Ann and Trapper help clients grow their business exponentially using innovative and integrated solutions. Prior to this, Sue-Ann was the Managing Director of CLEAR Kuala Lumpur and also Chief Data and Strategy Officer at Dentsu Aegis network. As someone who have got a holistic view of marketing and advertising, Sue-Ann shared with me in many aspects of the media buying from both traditional media as well as the digital media buying from the tech giants such as Google and Facebook. Moreover, we also discussed about the importance of balancing the branding, positioning with the performance marketing. Sue-Ann shared her thought on how organizations should really balancing the two in order to achieve the result and the impact an organization would want to achieve in the long run. Apart from that, we also discussed about Adwork.io, which is part of the Trapper Group, on how they are democratizing the media buying in the traditional media. In the past, buying the media inventory from the traditional media such as TV, newspaper, would often require a long history, relationship, and as well as the credit line with the media owner. However, through Adwork.io, the process of buying the media space has become significantly easier. While placing an ad, whether in the traditional media or digital media, often is easy, but it could be rather dangerous when it is not done right, which is why having a whole holistic view of understanding from the start to the end in order to achieve the objective and the goal are important. This is where the experience of the marketer and the advertiser could really come into play, and making sure that your marketing spend is justified and achieving the goal that you want to achieve. We also delve into various topics about the use of the data science, AI, and analytics in the space of the marketing and advertising. If you are a senior executive who are now torn or who has been torn about how you should be dividing your marketing spend in the traditional media versus the digital marketing or digital marketing space, I would highly recommend of listening and tuning into this episode and learn from Sue-Ann what is the best way to achieve the market penetration using the best of the both worlds. If you have any question for me or Sue-Ann, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a voice message or sending us an email. If you like more episodes where we go into the deep dive of understanding the business through the lens of the data and analytics, make sure you click the subscribe button on the podcast platform. Your subscription will simply make the algorithm to show the podcast to more people like you and myself who enjoy the world of data and analytics and business. I am your host, Jason Tan, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Sue-Ann. Welcome to the Analytics Show podcast. I'm so excited to have you here, despite we have so many conversations in the past. I'm so interested to learn a bit more about data-driven marketing and advertising. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Hopefully, this could be enriching for your listeners.
Absolutely. I'm always interested to learn so much from you. Now, let's start a little bit light. And for my research is looking at your profile, one thing that really caught my attention is that you just never stop learning new things and upskilling yourself throughout your career. I still remember some of the conversation that we were exchanged that you were wanting to learn more about AI. Now, share with us how, or maybe especially the young listener, of your style of learning and how this has helped your career.
Yeah. So just a bit of background about myself. Like I started my footing in advertising and in the agency, like I've always been a strategist. So for the past 18, 19 years, I've really just worked in strategy planning across like different agencies, different types of companies and consultancies. And I guess what I'd like to attribute to is the fact that being a strategist, you naturally are curious about things. So I personally just love learning. Like I like reading. So that really helped me to find out more about like new trends or what's to come, what would be disrupting the industry. And I think my choice of what I learn really progresses with my career. So that's why for the longest time before all these digital trends, like things were pretty much normal. But when I think the year of 2000, when web logging starts coming out, social networks and all of that, suddenly we have a boom in digitalization. And I felt like at that time, we really need to think about how to future-proof like what I do. And that's why also because at that time, I was appointed as the Chief Data and Strategy Officer in Malaysia. And that time I felt like, okay, everybody is talking about data. And being a strategist myself, like I do have some experience in data, but probably not in the scale of what everyone is talking about today. So that's why I started to pick up courses with Wharton, with Harvard Business School, to sort of get into like the whole scene and try to understand that much. What is data analytics all about, or big data? How does it impact businesses today? And over time, I just kept having this curiosity, like, okay, so what's next? What's next? So machine learning, AI, and all of that. And I guess that's how I've just kept going.
I love it. And also recently, you also just completed a master in psychology. One of my favorite subjects, I must say. What was your reasoning behind choosing psychology as the master for the study? And also, how does it help in your work with data and analytics and strategic planning, and also some of the books that you are doing?
Yeah. So I have always had a curiosity about people, and especially why they behave the way they do. And that's why a lot of that understanding goes into my work as well. So I was quite glad that like I wasn't a strategy planner in the aspect of just a job. I just felt like I was just a strategy planner in life, like because I kept observing things and trying to figure out why is it working that way. And so for me in 2018, where I decided to 2018, yes, when I decided to take a break from sort of like a sabbatical from work, I decided to pursue a master. So initially, obviously, the more expected master to take would be the MBA. And I was about to take the MBA to further my studies and knowledge in the field. But then I got held back and I was like thinking, if I'm going to pay so much for an MBA, I might as well invest in something that I'm really, really interested in, but perhaps never had a chance to pursue. So that's when I decided to take a master in psychology instead of an MBA. And secondly, I felt like I said, throughout my entire career, it's always about people's behavior. No matter whether it's business or especially in marketing, right? It's always about shifting perception and behaviors. And I felt like I knew, and I suppose you could call it at sometimes an imposter syndrome. I felt like I knew, but then I also feel like I don't know enough, or maybe my knowledge is not validated. So I wanted to take a course or a postgrad degree that could sort of help me validate or even not validate some of the things that I already know. Yeah, so that's why I picked that. And of course, as you mentioned, what I thought was a pleasant surprise when studying and taking this course is the fact that, of course, you study like a lot of different aspects of psychology, from behavior to like physiology to neurology. And I think neuroscience is what is very close to machine learning, to AI, neuropsychology. So I thought like that was one of the modules that we had to complete in the course. And I was really gravitating towards that particular topic, which is why I actually did consider if I want to take a master in AI after this. But then I think like, okay, maybe not. I should take another sabbatical. It's been quite a tough journey. But having said that, I felt like learning how the brain works actually do help in informing machine learning or AI. Because one of the key things that I really picked out from the study is human bias. So if you don't really have knowledge in that aspect, it's very easy for developers or programmers to develop bias into their algorithms anyway. So I was just really curious about that.
Absolutely. I so agree. I think whether we are in technology or whether we are in business, and whether it's B2B or B2C, it really, really is, at the end of the day, we are just trying to create a better outcome or better solution and make someone's life easier. And the understanding of the human and the psychology, it's just so much important. And I can so appreciate that. Maybe I should do one of the postgrad studies on that. I'm not too sure I have got enough appetite to do another postgrad study though. I think by the time that I did finish mine, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with uni.
Thank you. I think it takes a lot. Like it's not, I think if you're doing it full time, I don't know if you did it full time, but I think if you're doing it full time in presence of classmates, like I think it helps a lot to maintain the motivation and momentum. But if you're doing it part-time, and especially if it's distance learning, you really have to be twice the person you are.
When everyone was going out, you were like, no, I need to study for exam. Do you remember there was one person who was so supportive of you taking this sabbatical break and then going to take this postgrad study?
Yeah, that would be definitely my husband, because obviously he would need to have the income to support us.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to the main part of this interview. Share with us about your company, the Trapper. What do you guys do at Trapper, especially for the listener who are not from Malaysia or not from Southeast Asia? Tell us a little bit more about Trapper.
So Trapper is a marketing and media company. We do end-to-end planning and buying media spaces for our clients. Even though we've always operated quite traditionally in the media space, but since this year, we've been expanding our scope to cover more upstream strategic services as well. So this includes designing growth strategies for brands and businesses. Our services actually include digital media and marketing, from digital buys to SEOs to social marketing to developing direct-to-consumer strategies, e-commerce marketing, and etc. So it does cover like a whole chunk of the digital space as well, not just on linear media. And at the group level, which is Trapper Group, so we now have Trapper Consulting, which is basically the strategy consultancy outfit. We have AdMiner, which is a programmatic arm, and AdWork, which is a self-service media marketplace.
I'm so interested to find out more about the AdWork IO though, but we'll come back to that. We'll have a little bit more detailed discussion about that. But your role as a CEO at Trapper, so what role do you see yourself playing at the company?
Well, I think like everyone probably has their own style of leading or managing a company. And of course, like it goes without saying that all CEOs are responsible for the top line and obviously the bottom line. So I think it's not just, but to me, it's not just about running the company efficiently or growing the company. I think it's just, it should cover more detail, like, okay if setting visions and saying that, yeah, I mean, all companies want to grow their revenue, right? But I feel like my job is to put meaning behind that growth target and sort of motivate and empower everyone in the company to achieve that target together. So it's also really looking and evaluating our existing culture, our processes, the way we do things, the mindset that we have, the attitudes that we have, and try to work with the different departments to sort of cultivate the right attitude so that we are poised to reach that kind of growth targets that we have set out to do so.
The vision and culture that you're cultivating now, I understand that you have recently led the rebranding exercise at Trapper to signify the company-wide brand transformation that is centered around that growth culture. I think this is something that you just mentioned. But share with us more about this branding experience and also about this focus on the growth culture that you are fostering here.
Yeah. So maybe just to share a little bit about Trapper's background. So Trapper has been in the market for 20 years. They're Malaysia's largest independent company. And Trapper, at some point, they've got strategic alliance with larger networks. But when I joined in January this year, it remained as an independent outfit. So one of the things that I thought was really important is why we need to rebrand. I mean, we're all coming out from a post-pandemic world, about to come out from a post-pandemic world. I felt like it was really, really important to signify to the industry and more importantly to our people that change is coming and we have to be adaptable to that change. I think it's very difficult, or maybe it's just me, I'm not sure. I think it's very difficult for every CEO to have everything planned out from day one. I think a lot of times they may have some idea of what changes will happen in the company, but we still have to do the time and observe how the market is moving, how things are changing, and pivot and adapt as required. So I feel like getting our people ready in that change mindset to expect that change is really very important. So that's why I thought like a brand transformation, it was really, really important to communicate that both externally and internally. And why I want to look at growth is because I think at the end of the day, there are a lot of, I suppose, integration that is happening in the industry. And there are multiple solutions, multiple ways to solve the same problem, right? Some are more effective, some are more efficient. So I think this is probably has to do with a bit of my previous consulting experience. I just feel that what matters to business owners and CEOs are growth. So we want to adopt a growth culture because we want to be able to view our clients' businesses with the same lens. How can we help them grow? How can Trapper help them grow? It could be by way of media, having a robust media strategy, or out of scope. But for me, the solution is secondary. The important thing is to be able to help the client identify where is growth going to come from, whatever that they're growing. And so in order for us to do that, we have to be able to walk that talk, right? So that's why I felt like that kind of culture, that kind of messaging is very important internally for us as step one.
I so agree. I pick up a couple of things and keyword there: changes, integration, and growth culture. Now, on making sure internally the company and the people are ready for the adoption of these changes, would you say that data science, data analytics is one of your strategy or the role that you want this to play into developing this growth culture in organization, but also, like you say, that building an integrated solution for the company to fostering this growth culture?
Yes, absolutely. I think the most important thing is we need to develop in our culture an appreciation to solve problems. So these days, the most efficient way to solve problems are the ones that can save time, save costs and resources. And that's really leveraging on technology and data capabilities, right? So I believe in focusing on the problems to be solved first and then applying the best tech or analytics or whatever that is, as opposed to getting everyone to adopt data science skills, but then they don't know how to apply it. We work a lot on digital marketing, so obviously analytics play a very key role there. But let's say we're looking outside of digital marketing. We're looking at improving clients' marketing performance or improving any kind of, or even like content performance in their website, or I suppose whatever that they want to improve in, as long as they have the data that allows us some visibility on how it is performing and how we can optimize on that and what are the insights that we can glean from there to help solve their bigger problems. I think that is more important as opposed to saying like, oh, okay, so like we really absolutely need to adopt data science, but what are we going to do with it? So I like to focus on the job to be done in the beginning, and then we work backwards to sort of figure out what is the best technique to do that. And I'll give you an example, right? So recently we've got this project where we have to deliver a brand audit, like a really massive brand audit work at a very short amount of time, which is 1/3 of what the time usually is taken for that same amount of work. So for me is then we figure, okay, that's the time challenge and the resource challenge, but we still need to maintain scale. So how do we do that? And then I think that's where we thought like, hey, maybe we can apply AI in running the thematic analysis on all of these qualitative data that we're capturing over like 1,500 staff survey. So do you get me? Like, I feel like we always start from the challenge first, as opposed to thinking like, oh, I have an AI and I want to use it, or I think it's really cool, and we have to go to market and say that we have this product. I think that's the wrong way to go. I think like going from the business challenge and business problem is probably better.
I so agree with that, especially when AI is really kind of like the latest of the bandwagon that everyone is trying to jump on, right? I was joking the other day when someone messaging me say, our AI solution can solve this, and I can't help but to be sarcastic. And I say, if I have $1, every time I hear someone, they got an AI solution, I would become a millionaire now. But I totally so agree. Really should be the focus. AI or whatever technology that is really just a mean to get the result.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I always remember so vividly in the conversation that we had in the past is about the importance of the branding and how the market is, to some extent, is shifting. So a little bit more context is that because of the internet, I think the world of the marketing is really changing rapidly, and with this introduction of the digital marketing as a subset of the marketing. And I feel like you were saying, that people were paying so much more about the digital marketing, and it's so data driven, right? But at the same time, you believe that it's so important to look at the marketing holistically. And this is where branding is so important. Do you mind to share a little bit more about that, of what you had shared with me in the past, but with everyone else?
Yeah, sure. I'm a huge advocate of integrated approach. I don't believe in 100% digital or 100% linear media sort of approach. And I tell you why. So let's imagine, right, like 20 years ago, where digital is not that prominent, digital marketing is very limited. We rely a lot more on linear media to get information, whether it's radio, newspaper, TV, or out of home, billboards, whatever those things are. So when a brand launches a campaign with one message, then everyone no matter how old you are or what gender you are or where you're from, you would see the same message. And basically that's sort of like propaganda, right? Like everybody is aware of this particular campaign with message A. And so if you fast forward to today, where clients are focusing very heavily on performance, right? Optimizing their digital buys. And like a lot of companies are sort of saying, hey, we can do personalization at scale. So which means you and I might be in the same audience segmentation, but the messaging that you are exposed to and the messaging that I'm exposed to could be different. Yeah, so perception starts to shift in that way, right? There is no concerted perception of a single brand. And I think that is quite dangerous if you ask me, because then you would sort of dilute your essence. And then I'm not saying like which one is better than the other one. I'm just saying that there are times for efficiency and there are times for meaningful inefficiencies, because you kind of need to still make sure the brand positioning is communicated in a concerted effort to everyone. But at the same time, making sure that whatever your media strategies are, it's also very cost efficient. So I think this is where we talk about the funnel, right? Like having the right strategy to inform how your brand should be perceived in the upper funnel and how your brand or your budget can be optimized to improve sales or whatever the action is at the bottom funnel. And I think that that's like really, really super important, because otherwise, how do you measure perception if everybody's perception of you is different? And how do you build like certain positioning when everyone has like a different idea of what you stand for? Partially, maybe that's why a lot of brands are moving into the purpose area, right? And saying that, hey, this is our purpose. And if you believe in our purpose, then you would want to be part of our community. So we do see a lot of shifts happening in the marketing world. I don't think there is one solution to all. It really goes case by case. But I feel that over optimizing your spends is maybe going to get you the results you want in the short term. But over time, I don't think that works. I've worked on a lot of major brands in Malaysia who have decided to go 100% digital. And usually in the first year, it's fine because you save on your bottom line, right? You save on your investment. But if you have any kind of brand equity tracking, you realize that your brand will really take a hit in the second year. I think is still okay, but the third year is where it all goes downhill and you would have lost 3 years. So you really don't want that to happen.
On that note of the performance marketing versus the brand positioning, how do you think, or what is your advice for organizations to balance their marketing spend so they don't lose sight of the both sides?
I think, again, like I said, I think it depends on what is the campaign, or you have a budget that's attached to a particular campaign, right? So I think it's really important to sort of understand what is the objective of that particular campaign so that you can find like the good balance. But what I would absolutely advise against is for marketers to not be driven by a heuristic bias. If you have industry reports saying that 56% are being spent on digital spending versus linear media, so it's easy for you to just take that as the ultimate truth and reallocate your budgets to say like, oh, okay, I think we need to spend about 60% on digital. But that's not the case, because marketing is creativity and it really, really depends on the context and the job that needs to be done. And it is more tedious because you always have to think from ground up, right? From the problem to be solved, as opposed to immediately reach out for digital solutions. So just an example, another project that we've worked on, right? This client, they they have programs and they want to target the B40, which is the bottom 40 of income earners in the nation. And because they are a digital program, of course, it's so easy to set targets like, oh, we want to run campaigns that would guarantee us X amount of registration online. I think that's exactly what I call a heuristic bias, because it's a digital program. And then obviously the client's very digital, the agency is very digital. So everyone will think that how else to account for X amount of registration if we don't use digital marketing. But when we look deep into the problem and we look at the profile of the B40, their digital usage is half, or the data usage is a quarter of what average person would use. So which means other than Facebook and WhatsApp, they're probably not using their handphone much. So digital marketing, the right way to shift them? I don't think so. I think you still need to go on ground. You still need mass medium like TV to engage them, to convince them, hey, it's okay to set up your comfort zone. Because that is, for me, a more effective way of reaching them. However, because we still cannot attribute directly that medium to the registration. So a lot of clients would just say like, oh, that's not the right channel. So I really would like marketers to sort of take a step back and go back to the audience. I think the going back to the people, understanding their behavior, understanding their media touch points, it would inform your strategy a lot better than just saying that, oh, everything is digital now, digital is more efficient, we should put the money there.
One thing that I certainly feel that part of the reason of the shifting to more digital marketing is because of the ability of the attribution. And that's the challenges that we often have in the above the fold advertising and marketing, where the lack of the attribution, but it doesn't mean that they are not working. What would be your advice to the marketer to say, or maybe what would be your advice to improve the attribution above the fold so that people would continue to spend in this above the fold marketing and advertising?
Yeah. So, I mean, traditionally, and it's not like new news, there's always econometrics, right? Media market modeling. So the thing is, it is not everyone's appetite because you have to invest in that research. So on top of your spends, it's something that you have to invest in. And then there's this question like, who is accountable for that kind of performance? Is it the media agency or is it the client? So who should fork out that investment to spend in this kind of research to inform what everyone does, right? But I find that a really holistic econometrics modeling help marketers to really have a clear view of what is attributing to sales. And it's not just media channels, not just each individual channel, but it's also your sales incentive, any kind of promos that you're running, any kind of outside media sort of activation, it can also be captured. I think what would really help is if there is a service provider who can reduce the spend, or how should I say, the investment on this kind of modeling, making it faster, making it more intuitive, basically democratizing that to companies. I think that would really work. We have, to be honest, in Trapper, we have been talking to some service providers to look at like a exclusive partnership, because I think that is important to understand what is affecting or influencing your sales. Correlation does not usually mean causation anyway, right? So it's important to sort of have a crystal view of what works. But we find that the current barrier is just that the fees to do so is quite high. And so then this could be more like a luxury for a lot of businesses who may not have that kind of revenue, or even may not have that kind of media budgets to spend. But, in absence of that, I feel like just looking at your existing data, massaging or trying to put all the data together so that it all talks to each other, I think we can start from there. It's not necessarily like, oh, I have to have this perfect solution. Not necessarily. Again, I would just really circle back to the goals. I mean, usually for marketers, there are two things that are at your side, right? Like one is sales, which is your revenue. And a lot of things attribute to that. Secondly is also the brand performance, the brand equity. And I know a lot of companies, they do not understand how the tracking or the index would work for them. So they, it's easy for them to say, oh, let's switch it off and save the money and put it somewhere else. I would really advise against doing that. You do need to look at these two data to inform what or how you should prioritize your budgets.
Now, speaking of this democratization of the traditional media or the media buying, I think this is something that is really interesting from what I learned, that you guys have one of the sub-company called AdWork.io. It seems like you guys are really trying to democratize the whole space of the media buying in the traditional media space. Tell us a bit more about this company and how does it work?
Yeah. So in its shortest description, AdWork is Malaysia's largest media advertising marketplace. Yeah, it's a self-service marketplace which allows SMEs to purchase all of Malaysia's inventory, I think almost all, outside of Facebook and Google, according to their budget, target audience demographics, language type, etc. So traditionally, to buy media, businesses need to have a credit line and they really need to check out a lot of documentation, which might be quite cumbersome for many SMEs. And a lot of them they're not heavy investor in marketing. So they probably don't have very big budgets or they don't advertise very often in a year. So the know-how or the internal skills, internal resource with that kind of skills may not be in the company to begin with. Yeah. So AdWork is the perfect solution for them. If you want to run some ads, literally all you need is a credit card. And you purchase the ad space like how you would in, say, Lazada or Shopee or, in any e-commerce site. It's that easy.
Wow. And this media buying space is going into that your billboard, your newspaper, magazine, TV, including TV as network as well. Would that be correct?
Yes. So the team in AdWork are constantly working and collaborating with Malaysia media owners. And to a certain extent, we're also looking at the regional space, right? We're constantly working with media owners to create packages that are easy, that are still effective, but they're easy to be accessed by SMEs. So if you think about it, if you're an SME, other than Facebook and Google, which you can buy yourself with a credit card, or you can get a digital marketing freelancer or a small digital marketing boutique to help you to buy, you don't have access to all these 95% inventory in Malaysia. You have absolutely no access to that. So this AdWork is meant to do that. We're meant to democratize this access to everybody.
Fascinating. And I always really believe that I think the success of the Google and also Facebook is really coming down to how easily and how affordable it could be accessed by all of these SME. And I think the SME and small business, even down to a solopreneur, one-man shop, has been really enjoying this boom or the accessibility to market themselves through Google and Facebook for quite some time now. But it looks like the large corporations are also increasing their marketing spend in this space, especially the performance marketing. Do you think they are outbidding and pushing out the SME in this space?
I guess when it comes to price bidding, of course, the ones with deeper pockets will win. But I also believe that SMEs can turn to more creative ways to approach their campaigns because they are definitely more agile and there are less brand restrictions. And the whole point is to increase your brand visibility. So there are many social tactics or content marketing or even leveraging on trending influencers that can help you to create a pull strategy towards the brand. What I suppose SMEs don't understand is how, as simple as optimizing their website, making sure the content in there are constantly relevant to what customers are searching for. I think fundamentals might need to be in place so that if you're strong at the fundamentals, even if you're losing in some areas to large corporations, I do believe that there are many other ways or strategies that we can utilize to increase that visibility. It's definitely not an all or none situation.
Right. And how is the adoption of the adwork.io in the SME space now to where people are starting to realize that, apart from Facebook and Google and Instagram, there are all these 90% of the inventory they could actually really use to market their brand.
Yeah, for sure, it's created specifically for that. And the thing is, I think probably the biggest barrier or the biggest challenge is still at the SME level, where like SMEs, they've got very stretched resources, like they're very lean companies. Yeah. So they may have a marketing manager, but obviously there are different types of marketing managers and different levels of marketing experience as well. So we try to build the platform to be as easy as Google and Facebook, but you do still need some kind of strategic thinking from the SME side to make sure that you're buying the right things at the right time for the right people. So I think we try to build a solution that is all-encompassing, but still the SME businesses themselves need to understand that they have to invest in upskilling their people and gaining that kind of exposure. And marketing is, whether it's for large company or for SMEs, it's really a try and learn situation. So they come with the mindset that, if I switch it on, it means like my sales is going to go through the roof. Like that's not going to happen. So a lot of times they have to try and learn and figure out what works for them. And over time, I think the performance will only improve.
I'm curious to know, for the listener who are in the States or Australia, is that something equivalent of adwork.io in the States, in Europe, or in Australia?
I don't think so. I don't think there is like an exact like for like, but I think that there are a lot of media owners, or even in Malaysia currently, where they are waking up to the fact that a lot of markets, the SMEs are the bulk of the business makeup. So I think everybody is trying to figure out how do we use the internet or a platform to reach out to them directly for the purchase of inventory. So in all honesty, adwork is not the first one doing this. We have seen other media networks doing the similar thing, but because they are very limited in inventory, that's why I think that maybe they didn't take off.
That reminded me of what Jeff Bezos quoting about the use or the sales of the advertising space when he bought over the Washington Post. I think it really say that the shift of the buying or purchasing really changed from the traditional where you need to have $1 million credit line to the extent that it should be just anyone who has got a credit card and you can just buy a space for $10 for however long that it should be. It seems like the world is really, really converging into that line of thinking, hey, especially including the traditional media.
Yeah, absolutely. But having said that, like because of this excess of this, this democratized access, like everybody can buy sort of situation, I do think, and perhaps I don't have data so much to back it up, but I do think that there is a lot of excess and there is a lot of wastage. So imagine if you don't really know what you're doing and you only have a credit card, like you can buy the inventory, but how does that affect your business? Like, and if it doesn't work right, so it's easy for the business owner to get demotivated and say like, oh, like I did it, like switch on advertising, but it doesn't work. And I'm just going to go back to how I've been doing things. And that's absolutely not the right mentality.
Now, as a large corporation or SME, what are the ways you think that business can use the advance of data analytics and build up their capability in this space for brand building and growing?
I believe in having ultimately one dashboard with customized visualization. So I think it's like a one truth in the company with one language. One truth as in the one most important metric, and it's just cascaded into like different departments and teams in their own metrics. So if revenue is the most important metric in your company, then this dashboard should show it, and it should reflect the equation of or the formula of how every department's resources and costs are attributing to that metric. One language, meaning everyone should be familiar with the dashboard design. And obviously, I think what really works in platform services is, it may sound superficial, but it's really as simple as the UX, right? Whether it's intuitive enough. And it should almost be like a unique UX UI for the company, so that employees who are transferred from country A to country B or move from handling brand A to brand B, they all see the same data. They all understand the same language. And therefore, even in this kind, like if you're shifting people around the world, you will not lose productivity and you will not lose speed to market. So I think having one source where all the data can come together and talk to each other is great. But of course, that doesn't take just a lot of talent and skills, but it also requires a great cultural change. And in our most recent business report, something that we do to just help inform local Malaysian firms on the latest economic data, we have highlighted the two biggest barriers to digital adoption in this market is lack of business value-driven IT and lack of digital-first culture. So like if your company is using a laptop or your staff are using smartphones, like everybody's using that anyway. But it doesn't mean that you have a digital first culture. So amazingly, just increasing the perception of ease of use of a particular tool or even the usefulness can greatly affect adoption. And this kind of culture is really difficult to create because it needs financial reasons and the upskilling of talent.
Apart from the upskilling of talent and financial reason, do you think there is anything that we can do to increase the digital adoption and the shift of the mindset? And I have to say, I think it's super duper important for Southeast Asia, where they have constantly relied on the cheap import labor. And for that reason, they don't necessarily have that incentive to upgrade the overall ability in terms of the digitalization and technology. What do you think that is required to change this mindset that cheap labor, yes, you can access, but it's not going to go anywhere?
Yeah. So, okay, I would just play the devil's advocate role here. So if I'm the owner and I do think that cost-wise, human labor is cheaper than automation anyway, and I'm providing a job for all these people, like why should I change? So I feel like we have to acknowledge that that's a fact, right? That costs as business, we do want to look at managing costs. But if we look at the entire value chain or the entire process of creating that value, maybe we would see a much bigger cost savings as opposed to just looking at salaries. My thinking is we have to go back to fundamentals in any kind of digital transformation or digital adoption or whatever that is. I think we need to go back to fundamentals. We should measure, evaluate, and articulate the value that our business is creating. How can digital solutions be used to increase that value? whether it is lowering cost of doing business or increasing speed to market or increasing staff performance or generating high value skills, whatever that is. I think it's important to go back to that fundamental and redesign that entire value creation and delivery model of the business, how we want to increase competitive edge based on that, and then look at the people who will be delivering that to develop a digital first culture, look at the process, how to make it more agile, and then only evaluate whether the tech can deliver best on those core ideas and goals. So I don't think, like, as I mentioned like earlier in this podcast, right? If we try to encourage digital adoption for the sake of adopting digital, then I think the approach is not going to be effective.
I was just going to say that some of the listeners might have heard my kids are screaming. We are still in pandemic, so just a good reminder that we are all working from home and enjoy the fun. And please excuse Lincoln screaming in the background. Now, thank you for sharing that. I really agree about the fundamental. I got one last question for you before we move to conclude this interview of the podcast, is that you have been in the industry for quite some time now, so you have seen all the big development unfolding in front of you. I'm really curious to know what your view in terms of how business and advertising landscape has changed compared to, say, 20 years ago.
Well, I think like many things have changed tremendously. I think last time, obviously, things not moving in such a fast pace. Like you are not pressured to move any faster than you were at that time. But today is completely different. Yeah, of course, like there are more advanced computing, analytics, the amount of data available has changed. So many things that we can do, we couldn't do before. But I think what are the most prominent changes is one, how we do things. I think and I'm probably just speaking for myself, I think I have learned that last time I would put 100% rigor in whatever I do. But that is because we have the luxury of time, right? Like we have a longer turnaround time for going back to clients with suggestions. We have a longer lead time for speed to market. But today, if you want to be competitive and you want your client to be competitive, they have to launch a product from conception to on the shelf in like 2 weeks. So you don't have that luxury to run the kind of research that you want to run or do the kind of rigorous work that you were accustomed to last time. So you have to be really creative in balancing rigor and scale and how to make that astute judgment. 80%, even if it's not perfect, 80% is sufficient. 80% of confidence is sufficient. So I think like that's probably the biggest thing. Because last time, and I give you an example, like some things still don't change. For example, like in this pandemic, moving into this year, and we have learned a lot from our business last year in the 2 MCOs that Malaysia has experienced, right? And we're in our 3rd MCO this year, 3rd lockdown. And moving into this year, we were very clear in one thing. Whatever that we propose to the client, we call them agile plans, which means we monitor the rate of infection and we can kind of guess like when the lockdown is going to happen and how severe the lockdown will be. So our plans need to be agile in the sense that if there anything that shifts in the market, we should be able to shift the spends across channels as easily as when the government announced the lockdown. So we have that kind of mentality and attitude, and we were prepared to do that. And we had plans that would show for that. However, unfortunately, I think still some media owners are not accustomed to that kind of agility and speed, and therefore they miss out. So for example, we know that overall, globally, TV viewership has gone down since digital has increased because of the second screen. But during the lockdown, we realized that TV viewership has gone up tremendously. So it's not as if like when there is a lockdown, we need to shift all our spends to digital. That's not true. So the media consumption is fluctuating pre and during and post lockdown, right? So agile plans means we can easily shift the spends to where the eyeballs are for the client as quickly as we can. However, then we realize that as much as we would like to support our TV partners, their process doesn't allow that. They expect the client to have a TV commercial that's been approved by the government body, and then only it can go on air. So as much as we want to support them and shift the budgets into TV advertising, I feel like they themselves are not as speedy or agile as they should be by, say, for example, preparing like a production team to help clients who don't have an existing TV asset to run something with high level of quality and get all the necessary approvals. So for me, is we try as much as we want to do that because we do see this shift in 20 years, the speed of things. However, a lot of current businesses, media owners, media agencies, in fact, their process or their culture or their thinking is not future-proofed. So you can't sit there and say like, hey, why are all the agencies shifting budgets to Facebook and Google? Because that we don't have an option, right? So I think that's probably for me, like the biggest change and the biggest adaptation that companies need to be aware of today.
I second that observation. The viewership in the TV has gone up. I learned that from one of my contacts in the TV network here in Australia. It got me thinking at the same time, though, that yes, I don't think the media owner or the business owner have the luxury of my kid training his agility. But at the same time, I think one thing that I do pick up, though, is that to some extent, I feel like the challenges is that the traditional media owner and the new media owner like Facebook or Google are not necessarily playing in the same equivalent of the playing field. For example, as you were saying, that the commercial has got approved by a certain government agency before they can go on ad. Whereas in Facebook or Google, you don't have this sort of approval required. And that itself has got to be factored into that whole agility. So that playing field is not quite equal. And of course, it creates all the pro and con, etc. That being said, do you think we will soon see the introduction of the regulation in all various jurisdictions, especially because of some of the issue that have been popping up over the last 2 years in the space of fake news or the commercial misinformation? Do you think that we will soon see this sort of regulation in the digital space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is then on the government to make sure that these industries are maintaining their competitiveness, right? So I don't think like any of the businesses in any country operate independently. Even like Trapper, we are part of an association, we're part of an ecosystem. So that's why I say, as well as our intent is to be agile for our clients, we are still as agile as our partners, which are all the media owners. And they are as agile as the government. So we do have like a domino effect, right? So I think we need to understand there are some things that we can do as a business owner, and there are some things that we need to do collectively. So for example, the example that you gave, right? Like there's very strict governance in mainstream media as opposed to absolutely zero governance for your Facebook and Google. And therefore, I feel like if you were to see a commercial on TV versus you see a commercial on Facebook and Google, the value of the brand is perceived is completely different as well. And I think when you look at SMEs, why do they think like, oh, digital marketing means Facebook and Google? It's because you have a long tail of digital freelancers or boutiques like a few people team, and they are trained and Google certified, Facebook certified to buy media for these two. So essentially, they are sort of like a reseller. And I can really bet my last dollar with you, they have no idea how to buy non-Facebook Google inventory, even if it's digital. So for example, we have like Astro Group, we have Media Prima Group in Malaysia, and they're very integrated. They have a lot of digital assets as well. But if you want to get into their inventory, I don't think these guys are trained for it. So that's why I say that there is an ecosystem that is sort of spurring the trend, why things are moving the way it's moving. And you're absolutely right and spot on. We have to address that within the ecosystem itself to make sure that everybody is competitive. And I won't say like, oh, you should just switch off advertising in those two tech giants and shift all your budgets to support local. Like, not at all. I don't believe that the way forward is to eschew from technology or to eschew from or to avoid or ban what is disrupting us. I think it is more on us to figure out how we can overcome that disruption and that competition. I think that's the way forward, not to ban them or to say like, oh, you're no good, we're going to keep you out of our country. I mean, you can do that if you're China, but then you have 1 billion people in your market, so you don't need to rely on them.
That is so true. It's really about how to get everyone coming together in that ecosystem that you mentioned. Now, that almost brings us to the end of this interview. I got 2 last questions for you. Number 1 is, what is your most important first principle?
I guess it has to be, well, maybe the most current one. It would have to be tolerate chaos, bring clarity. I think it's extremely important in an age where collaboration needs to happen at all levels, anywhere, and so fast. So if we don't have clarity, we can get lost in chaos, and it will feel like we're working very hard. It will feel like we are doing a lot of things, a lot of activity, but trust me, zero productivity. So especially in advertising, I think everyone has an idea, and the most accurate solution often get lost in the process because everyone has a say or everyone has an opinion. Everyone brings their own data source. So I think having clarity, you cannot avoid chaos anyway, right? So if you're going to shut down and say like, hey, this is not for me, then you're not going to get anywhere. So instead of avoiding it, I think it's about tolerating it, but above and beyond that, bring clarity into the situation.
What is one book that you have read and thought it would have been better for your younger self to have?
Funnily, I don't think I have one. I always feel that I've read all the books that I need to read at the right time. Somehow, it always felt like a bit of a serendipity, like as if God knows that I need to know or learn that piece of information and the right book just presents itself. Having said that, I've recently completed this book called Blitzscaling by Chris Ye and Reid Hoffman. At first, it sounds, to be honest, a bit like a sales hot wash, but I promise you it gets better, and it gets a lot better as you go. They're very practical advice and insights on how to build businesses at breakneck speed. But of course, this isn't for everyone. Every business owners have their own goal and vision on how they want to exit the business. But I felt like it's really good to learn and see things from another perspective. So even if blitzscaling is not for most companies, I do think that a lot of new age thinking, new way of thinking culture can be harnessed, and it's very relevant to any businesses today. Because like I said, you're not operating independently. You are operating within the system. And if the system changes, you need to understand how that will impact you and how you can future-proof yourself. So even if my business model is not about growing at all costs kind of model, I think it helps a lot more to understand how I can shift the business and the people to be more agile in doing things.
Love that. I may have heard that book, but I had to check it out after you describe it. Now, once again, thank you so much for this podcast interview. Appreciate of everything that you have got to share, especially, with the branding, growth culture, and also the advertising. Really love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. It's my absolute pleasure. I hope that it works for your audience and it adds some value to their life since they've been listening for close to an hour. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.